Hi, I'm Todd Howe. Welcome to NewFilmmakers LA in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. I'm here today with Jason Cooper, director, producer, writer of Vanished at the Finish, a short documentary. Let's take a look at a little clip from Vanished at the Finish.
Zach Claudio is a former drug user. Doesn't speak English. He has a cognitive disability. The first time in New York, alone, after running 42 kilometers. Without money, without place to sleep, without nothing. It was a nightmare, long-lasting nightmare, without finish.
Jason, do you want to tell us a little bit about the premise of the
short film? Vanished at the Finish is a short doc, and it tells the story of a guy named Jean-Claudio Marengo. He is a mentally handicapped, recovering drug addict from Italy who, through wild circumstance, found himself running and completing the New York City Marathon, and then at the finish line, disappearing for 2 days. If you don't know anything about running, the New York City Marathon is the biggest marathon in the world. There's
60,000 people.
60,000 people, and there are 1 million people on the streets cheering them on. It's like, I don't know if you ever watch marathon footage or like on ESPN or something like that, but it's usually like, there's a few people here and there clapping. In New York, on the big avenues and in Central Park, it's like 10 people deep, people going crazy. It's pretty wild. And so he was surrounded by all of these people, and yet somehow just vanished. It was in the New York Times, which is sort of how I heard about the story.
So that's how you came across it?
That's how I came about it. I literally read the story in the paper, and then I couldn't get it out of my head.
It was the one thing that was keeping you.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, you're a filmmaker. You have those things where you
get up in the morning. That was the story.
Yeah. It's like, how does someone get lost? Like, what happened to this guy? Like, how did he end up there in this place and all these things happening? And it just seemed like one of those fish out of water, only in New York kind of stories, and I couldn't get rid of it.
What interested me, and maybe you can elaborate on this, was the I guess rehabilitation. Drug rehabilitation center in Italy.
Well, that's sort of like, in filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, you always have these, you find out there's always more to the story, first of all, but then sometimes you get lucky and you find out there's something incredible. Yeah. And so Jean-Claudio was in New York with a group of runners from a rehab facility in Italy called San Patriano. Mm-hmm. And if you were Italian, you would know it. It's quite famous there. It's a free program where you go to live for 3 to 4 years, minimum of 3 years, and it's basically a commune. You're isolated from the world. They teach you new job skills. They change the way you think, and they're incredibly successful at getting people off of drugs. Yeah. They have like an 80% success rate in terms of people falling back into drugs after being there, which, if you know anything about rehab, is much better than any of the programs, especially in the States, in the way that we handle drug rehab here.
Were you tempted at any point to turn this into a feature film? Because I love the fact that your introduction to something much deeper is phenomenal in and of itself, but then you've got this much deeper story of the rehabilitation clinic and a multitude of other success stories of the real people at the core. I think if I would have been fluent in Italian, I would have been more interested. It was hard enough to really get the story, to feel comfortable about how I was capturing the story in our first visit there. And there are people there who spoke English, and there were a couple Americans who were in the program there. And so one of them was our guide for the time there, and he was able to take us to people who knew him, help us with some of the translation elements, and we kind of focused on finding people who could at least speak enough English to make sure that I was getting the gist of it and not making a fool of myself trying to interview people that I couldn't understand. I think a feature too, you have to really, it's such an endeavor. I still love making shorts because it's something that I think it fits my personality. Mm-hmm. My mind wants to bounce to the next thing once I've wrapped something up, and I have other curiosities that will start sticking there. And so I don't think I'm going to go back to it now. I do want the story of San Patriano, and I think there is something to be done with comparing it with how Americans deal with addiction, because it's so different, it's so compassionate, it's so patient.
which you don't see any of that here in the way that we talk about addiction.
Well, when you mention 3 to 4 year program,
yeah,
that's in and of itself. It's completely different.
You don't even, it's unimaginable. You would never think that, we'd rather throw someone in jail, to be honest, as if that's going to be the solution to the problem. And I don't know that, what San Patriano does can be done here, or if it is our solution, but it's something that I think the story is really remarkable. And, if this at least gets people to become aware of it, I think that for me is kind of one of the wonderful things. And also the power of running, or some sort of, new addiction. That's what running became for Jean-Claudio and so many people who go to this program. If you talk to runners, they talk the same way that addicts do a lot, because they are addicts. Like if they're really serious, they have to run to get the serotonin out. And I think there's something very, very tied together, the way that people deal with drugs and people deal with running. One of them obviously is good for you, and one of them is as bad as it gets. Was
it something that you had this story mapped out from the beginning? Well, obviously.
I struggled with it, to be honest, because I thought I was going to have this ending. I didn't know how to end it. That's what it came down to. I had the intro, which is what's this mystery? How does someone disappear? Setting up the race, setting up who Jean-Claudio was, and I knew I wanted to take people to San Patriano to sort of see where he came from. I had 2 very wonderful editors come in at different points. I edited something, got stuck, and brought in people I trusted to help me. You need that, I think, in filmmaking. It's a collaborative medium, especially a story where in a film like this, where I wore a lot of hats and did a lot myself. I needed to step back and let someone else tell me, oh, you're missing this part of it, or you're over-explaining this. I'm sure there are filmmakers out there who just have the singular vision and can pull it off, but I think for most people it's important to have that. Ultimately, the film is best when people see it and get what you're trying to deliver. And so you kind of need to know that that's coming through, and the only way to do that is through collaboration.
Well, you've done that. You've managed to tell an amazing story within such a short period of time.
Thank you.
What is next?
I'm currently I'm producing a friend of mine's feature about the fires in Malibu. His home burned down, and so it's sort of this first-person narrative of the fires and what it's sort of how people are fighting to save their own homes and what that might look like for the future. And then we're in production on another short. This one will be here in LA. Every year the county buries 1,500 indigent people who die without anyone who claim their bodies after death. And we decided we wanted to tell those stories of the people before they died. So heavy stuff, but
very
something
heavy.
We're excited about.
They're beautiful stories at their core that need to be told.
100%.
And people need to hear. So thanks for being a part of NewFilmmakers.
Thanks for interviewing me. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for your time.